This video is more of a vector for people to discuss different ideas in the comment section. When I was in a Mayako wrenching call on the Discord server, the topic of supporting local tracks and the entire idea of arena-style races came up. This kinda led to a few different things that I figured could make it into another State of RC discussion video. Like before, I'll be talking about this from a lower level perspective, someone who isn't entirely privy to how the intricacies of RC companies work. I'm also very US centric, not in terms of bias, but in terms of knowledge. I haven't been to different countries specifically to race, so if there's a gap in my knowledge about the RC scene in other places of the world, like Europe or the Upside Down, please let me know in the comments below. Before we begin, I'd also like to thank this video's sponsors A-Main Hobbies, Peach State Hobbies, and Cow RC. Anything you guys purchase using the links in the description below will directly support me as well. Let's begin. The first thing I want to talk about is the arena 8th scale races like race time events and races like the Peach State Classic and RC Pro-Am and Fall Brawl. Something interesting about some of these races is that they started out as big club races at permanent tracks. A good example would be the Peach State Classic, the race you're seeing on screen right now. This race used to be held annually at the Loganville RC Complex in Loganville, Georgia, but when Mark Moon, the owner of the track, wanted to expand, the Peach State Classic was moved to the Raboon Arena in the middle of the North Georgia mountains. Like I said, this was done so races like the Peach State Classic could become bigger than they were before, because even though Loganville is a very large yard and accommodation for large races, there was a limit to what the facility could actually handle. The Raboon Arena could house much larger crowds, and that's what Mark Moon set out to do. These days in Georgia we have the Peach State Classic and the North Georgia Shootout, both hosted at this host arena. As much as I enjoy these races though, there is one thing that was sacrificed in order to make these races a reality, and that was the SOS series. The SOS, or Southern Off-Road Racing Series, was held at a multitude of different RC tracks around the Southeast a few years ago. It was a points-based series that had some of the best Southeast racers competing in a series. The best modern equivalent I could say would be the FRCC or Florida RC Championship held by Lance of Elite RC. SOS was like that, but for 8th scale and around the southeastern states that didn't include Florida. I wasn't around in 8th scale at that time, I was more focused on 10th scale, but it did look like a lot of fun to have a point series in the southeast. The reason I brought up SOS is because these races were also held at permanent tracks around the southeast. Having these big races at these permanent tracks was good for a few reasons, I think, and one of them is public exposure. Again, I really like the new Peach State Classic and North Georgia Shootout races, but in terms of showcasing the RC racing hobby to a ground level RC crowd, I think they're inferior to races on permanent tracks. Take Easley RC or S&B Raceway for example, both in South Carolina. These tracks are pretty visible to the outside world. If you were to drive past the park that S&B is at, you'd be able to see the track right there front and center. Arena-style races, while good, don't have the same level of public on-the-ground exposure that these permanent tracks do. You're far more likely to have people drive by and see S&B, Easley, the Barn, or even Loganville than people drive by a horse arena and see the race being held, especially if your arena is in a very secluded area with very little through traffic. I'm sure many of us can attest to the amount of time someone new to the hobby has said the words, "I didn't even know this track was here." The next point links into the first one, and that's actually hooking people into the RC racing scene. When someone stumbles upon an RC race, they usually only do so when there's something to notice. Usually this something to notice manifests itself in the form of a large crowd or commotion. Going back to S&B for a sec, which is in a public park, if someone were to drive by and see a few people running around the track on a practice day or a club race, they wouldn't be as interested if they were to see a huge event with media, loud announcers, and lots of people. This piques interest for those who aren't in the know about RC racing and plans to see for its discovery in said RC racing. Once again, this is much easier to do on a permanent track that's much more visible to the public, rather than a secluded town like most arena-style races. This is where I think 10th scale has one up on 8th scale, as big 10th scale races do take place at permanent 10th scale tracks, even if they're becoming more and more scarce these days, a point I'll get to later. Clash of Champions takes place at Hoosier RC Complex, Masters of Dirt is taking place at Hobby Action this year out in Arizona, and Florida Carpet Championships takes place at Beachline RC and, well, take a guess. These races are usually capped to keep both the race program shorter and better for those involved, and because indoor racing facilities can only accommodate a certain number of people, I don't really see why we can't have 8th scale races held in a similar manner with larger races like the Midwest Nitro Challenge and the DNC. Going back to the series point before, I think that in A-scale racing, there are a lot of places out there that could absolutely be a championship series if implemented well. Let's use the race time races for example. Each race usually hosts some of the best racers the US has to offer, and they are all guaranteed to run because they're all covered on tracks. You have 4 races a year, those being Southern Indoor Championships, Psycho Nitro Blast, Wicked Weekend, and Alabama Manufacturer Shootout. I think that counting points in the Pro Class only would do a couple things. For one, I think that having a point system that is intertwined with the race time events will give racers more things to talk about and geek out over. Another thing that it would do, again if you were to only count the Pro Classes, it would encourage a lot of up-and-coming, usually younger racers to bump up into Pro to see where they stack up against the big guys in a championship setting. There are of course some obstacles to this. You need a lot more scrutiny and general driver etiquette enforced at these races. This also includes things like tech inspection to make sure nobody is breaking the rules, running a truggy tank and buggy for example. These rules may not have to be as stringent as they are in raw races, just enough so people will take the races a bit more seriously. You'd also need to pay these people actually performing these tech inspections and/or referees. Thing is though, I think these things can be done with the right push from the right people. This extends to other races that are run by individual people like RC Pro-Am and Fall Brawl, as well as Peach State Classic and North Georgia Shootout. In short, championship series are cool, and I'd like to see more of them again. This leads me to the state of 10th scale RC racing. As the outdoor season is winding down for many in the Northern Hemisphere, and the indoor 10th scale season is ramping up for those lucky enough to have a 10th scale track nearby, I feel like now would be a good time to talk about where I think 10th scale is set to go from here. Truth be told, there's a few different directions 10th scale could go if a few conditions are met. The first, and I think most likely direction, is the semi-permanent track. This is already pretty popular in places like Europe and the UK. The idea of a semi-permanent track isn't too dissimilar to how an arena 8th scale style race is operated. The only difference here, of course, is the scale of the operation and the surface being worked with. I already made a video talking about the different 10th scale RC track types you can find around the world, but for now we're going to focus on the artificial surfaces. CRC carpet, EOS carpet, and AstroTurf are all popular RC track surfaces in the 10th scale world, and all have the benefit of portability and lack of maintenance. Starting with the lack of maintenance, this is part of the reason why so many different 10th scale tracks have gone to carpet and AstroTurf in the first place. Track rebuilds and dirt track maintenance takes a lot of time, money, and passion to create. And if any one of those three aren't there, then you can't really have an indoor dirt track. Of course the passion for many is there, it's the time and money that makes things more difficult. Artificial surfaces are quite simply easier and cheaper to work with. Instead of needing expensive earth moving equipment, all you need to do some track repair is some spare carpet and some tape. Now, many might say that the only acceptable 10th scale off-road surface is dirt. Well, to be brutally honest for a moment, we don't live in the 80s and 90s anymore. Things have changed, and among those changes is an increase in rent across the board. At a certain point, it becomes a question of would you like a carpet track or no track at all. Now don't get me wrong, if a carpet track is done wrong, it can be very boring, like that one EOS race a little while ago that was actually on road with jumps. You're probably looking at it on screen right now. However, when done well, like for example here at Beachline RC during the Florida Carpet Championships, carpet tracks can actually be very fun and interesting. The same thing can be said with AstroTurf tracks laid on more natural surfaces like grass. The last thing I want to talk about is the state of nitro and electric racing in the 8th scale RC world. Recently we had the e-buggy worlds at the Buggy Arena in Barcelos, Portugal, and it showed what many think will be the future of 8th scale racing as a whole. In terms of what most RC racers will participate in, I find this prediction to be correct. The main reason I believe this is because nitro races, while fun to watch for us RC enthusiasts, isn't as easy to get someone in to watch an hour-long race from the outside world. Shorter form racing would seem to be the way forward, and electric racing seems to fit this mold perfectly. There's one massive issue that electric faces though, and that's the same thing all forms of electric racing has compared to internal combustion racing: the lack of sound. For those into racing as a whole, the lack of sound for racing can really kill the entire atmosphere and make it much more boring. This was seen at the recent e-buggy world in Barcelos, where any form of cheering, talking, clapping, or even announcing was completely banned and heavily enforced. Now, I'm not a motocross or supercross person, nor am I a very boisterous person in most circumstances, but I do like to have fun. So when I say treating RC racing like professional golf or tennis to an even further extent is not only stupid, but will also kill the sport as a whole for those on the outside. You need fanfare in racing, and squashing what little we have in RC is not only going to hurt, it's going to turn people away. The solution to this would appear to be more actual racing and less qualifying. If you watched the Roar Nationals at Thornhill not too long ago, they employed a ladder main setup after the qualifying, and even though this would be considered anecdotal evidence, I'm fairly certain the viewership and audience retention and interaction was much higher compared to other War Nationals in the past. In short, I think the IFMAR structure has its place, but I think there needs to be more variety in race formats to keep things more interesting. Going back to the main point at hand, will A-Scale e-buggy overtake Nitro buggy in terms of popularity and viewership? Absolutely not. Just like motorsports in the full-size area, more people are drawn to the noise, smoke, and long mains of Nitro, something that e-buggy simply doesn't have. Even in a situation where electric pit stops somehow became a thing, it still wouldn't be the same. Racing is a very sensory-driven sport, and when one of those senses is taken away, it loses a lot of its appeal. Where e-buggy really does have a place is in the club scene with regular hobbyists. Even though the viewership and audience retention of A-Scale racing tends to favor Nitro, it's really obvious to see that e-buggy is far more popular of a class to participate in compared to Nitro. At the recent Peach Day Classic race, there were 147 total e-buggy entries in Pro, Intermediate, and Sportsman, not counting 15 and up. By contrast, Nitro buggies only barely breached 100, and this trend is playing out across different clubs and tracks around the US. The point I'm trying to make is that Nitro buggy will always be the go-to class for people who really want to be serious about their racing and want to take it to the next level. Meanwhile, weekend warriors and people who don't want to take it that seriously will stick with electric classes, thus making them more popular from a sales perspective. Like the saying goes, Nitro is the glory, but e-buggy pays the bills. But that's just an opinion formed from a limited RC worldview. As such, I'd like to hear your observations and predictions for the RC world in the comments below. Also, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you enjoyed it as well. Also, if you want to support me another way, be sure to check out my membership where you can watch videos early, as well as my Patreon where you can also watch videos early. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank my channel members Jeffrey Kunz, Ralisk86, Claymore RC, Brian G, Brent Elliott, Matthew Armini, and my patrons Michael Williams, RC World Discord server, Dave Armstrong, Rob Bedingfield, Caden Merks, Ian Petrie, Jeffrey Kunz again, Shane T. Ruth, Gable Barber, Freeman Racing Team, Shui RC, and of course, Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.